So welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success story series of interviews where we discuss with local business leaders, their backgrounds, their successes and challenges, and what really drives them forward. Today I'm delighted to have with us Ellie Stead, who's the brand new CEO at St Nick's, previously director at the Yorkshire Air Museum, and she has a wealth of experience in the private sector. So Ellie, thanks for coming on board today. Welcome. And if you'd like to introduce yourself and St Nick's today and how you help people, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. So as you said, I am a very new CEO to St Nick's because I don't actually start until a week's time. But yeah, my background is in banking, it's in payments. I've worked for global firms throughout the whole of my career. But about a year ago, just over a year ago, 1st of February 2021, I took the decision that actually I wanted to go into roles and work in organisations that were giving more back. Right. And set myself a target really to find the right company, the right organisation, and also to, I suppose, expand my capabilities and my skill set into the non-exec sector as well. So in the last 12 months, I've become a non-exec director for two different companies. One's a housing association and one was the Air Museum. And so when the Air Museum lost their current director at the end of the year last year, I actually stepped back as a non-exec and offered to do an interim role for 3 months, which I just finished last week for them. So that's been my transition from private sector to charity, third sector, and a little bit of heritage at the Air Museum thrown in. But I'm looking forward to getting stuck into St Nick's. Many people do not know it exists. It's a 24-acre nature reserve in the heart of York. It's called the Heart of York as part of our strapline and our logo, and it's built on what used to be an old landfill site. So it's very much about sustainability, about the environment, about nature and connected with nature for the benefit of your mental health. So I'm really excited to be getting engaged with them from next week.
Wonderful. And yeah, as you said before we started, I'm not aware of it, so I've got to go and find out a little bit more about it, and I'll come down and see if I may. So what are some of the things that you're planning to do with St Nick's? Just I know you're new into the role, so I totally understand you might be looking forward to it. But what are some of the things you will, the first few things you'll get stuck into?
Well, the first thing, and obviously having done an interim role in a very different organisation, I went from an organisation with 20,000 people with HR departments and finance departments to, the Air Museum, which let's just say is a lot smaller in terms of its staff base and its volunteer community, but actually the size is very comparable to St Nick's. So I know that I'm going to be a bit of a jack of all trades, and it's very much about getting your sleeves, rolled up and getting stuck in. But it's that balance between being that kind of, all things to all people there, but keeping one eye on the strategic and future facing elements of where the charity is going. How does it continue to grow and evolve? How do we think about where are the next steps, maybe in 2, 3, 5 years time? So it's that balance of the practical operational day to day, keeping all the plates spinning. Yep. And actually, where do we go next? Where do we look for new funding sources? How do we, to your point, make sure that the visibility, the presence and the awareness about what St Nick's does and the benefit that it can bring is more widely understood, around the communities, both the physical communities and the business communities in York. Great.
Well, I mean, we're reasonably well connected in the business community, so please, if we can help in any way, we'd be delighted to do so. So please make sure you let us know. And going back to your background specifically, how did you get into the original businesses, and how did you build your career? What was the sort of the journey that you followed?
So I left school at 18 after A levels. I had absolutely no interest in going to university. I had the grades to do it. The teachers at school wanted me to do it. My parents were happy either way. But actually, I wanted to get out there and get in the world of work. I'd been working since I was about 10 years old. My mother and father had a greengrocer's shop, and so I started my career, selling fruit and veg and actually learning how to skin, wet fish at a fairly young and tender age. And learned that work ethic from my parents, and then did the normal kind of Saturday jobs. And actually, I worked at Dolces from 15 to 18, and they offered me a role on their management development programme, and I'd also applied to Yorkshire Bank. Yorkshire Bank obviously didn't involve working weekends. So actually, that was a decision based on the fact that having worked weekends, for quite a few years, even though I was only 18, I would go into banking. So I went and worked for Yorkshire Bank for 10 years, lots of retail branches in and around Leeds, set up their first business banking centre as part of a small team in around 1994. And then worked in their head office, and through that time I did all my associateship, Chartered Institute Bankers exam, so I did the equivalent of my degree. Yep. And then I did a master's part-time while working at University of Bradford Management Centre, and then I went to work for GE, so very different pace, very different kind of company. My first exposure and opportunity to work for an American company, and did all my Six Sigma training. So people sometimes think I've got a black belt, or they read my CV, they're expecting me to do some ninja moves, and I have to kind of explain, no, it's about process improvement. And then I did consultancy work for 2 or 3 years, so some troubleshooting, some process re-engineering, and then I started at TSYS as a director for relationship management, and I used the opportunities that TSYS provided to me to really grow throughout that 18-year period, which feels like a long time, and it's kind of comparable to the age of my daughter. She was just 6 months old when I joined there. Right. So I went from specialised teams in the kind of risk and compliance space, and then grew to have those disciplines plus the operational teams that were facing off to our clients and delivering service on a day-to-day basis for tens of thousands, or even millions of customers. So, yes. So yeah, a very different environment, and lots of travel at certain points. So although I've always been very proud to be from Yorkshire, I've always managed to live in Yorkshire, I have travelled all over the world and extensively to the US. But again, part of my transition was about doing something where the benefit was closer to home, either UK, or as it transpires, York for St Nick's and Yorkshire for Yorkshire Housing as a non-exec. Yeah,
well, wonderful. Oh, and what did you want to do when you were growing up? What was the dream?
I asked, I couldn't remember any one thing, and I said to my mum the other day, was there something that kind of I wanted to be, ballerina or astronaut, or and she said no. She said the only thing that you ever wanted to be was good at what you did. She said, right. And that's the consistent thing that you always either said or did, was just try to be the best that you can be at whatever it is you set your mind to, which I kind of thought was interesting, because that's pretty much continued for me as a premise throughout my personal and working career. It's, I want to do the best that I can, and it's what we say to our kids all the time, if you do your best and you make your best effort, can't ask for anything more.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's just do your best at it, and just see what comes from it. Wowzers. So obviously you've had quite a varied career in different businesses, but what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome?
I think, like many working mums, that balance of family and a very demanding full-time job. So there's always that slight element of guilt factor as I mean, my daughter's 19 now, but that challenge, and actually that again, non-typical becoming, thankfully, more typical arrangement where actually the father is the primary carer, and that was the reality of my situation throughout, my daughter's childhood. So that was certainly kind of one challenge. I think the other thing was as well, when I started in my career, it was very much from a management and senior management perspective, very male dominated. Yep. And, certainly, parts of my career earlier on in TSYS, that was still the case. So actually, I suppose the biggest challenge or counterpoint is the epiphany that I realised was, you emulate the behaviours that you see, and sometimes those are quite male-oriented behaviours. Yep. And as a female leader, I suppose probably about 6 or 7 years ago now, I came to the realisation that my management style was fundamentally different, but that's okay. And embracing that and being quite overt about the fact I'm going to manage people, situations and activities in a really different way to some of my male counterparts, particularly when I got up to that sort of SVP level. But that's okay, because that diversity is actually what makes us stronger. It makes any team stronger.
Yeah, brilliant. Wow. And what are some of the things, sort of most important things you've learned in business and potentially in life?
Most important thing is that it's all about people, people, not just as a collective, but that every individual is unique, and really appreciating and understanding and accepting that there isn't a one size fits all, and whatever decision you make or whatever process you put into play or whatever you communicate, some people will receive it and hear it in different ways, and some people will embrace it and some people will fear it. And I think really making yourself available to have those follow-up conversations for those people who do view, accept, digest or learn differently. I think the other thing is communication. You can't have enough of it, and consultative communication, particularly with the teams that you're working with, to build stronger decisions, to build an inclusive environment, but also for those people who, and again in a charity sector, those people who are one step removed or are not as frequently aware of the things that are going on, like your volunteer community. So how you interact with them, how you communicate with them, how you keep them in the loop, and how you make sure you understand what their needs are, because they're quite different to a paid employee's needs. I think the one thing that's consistent throughout my whole career, key learning, never lose your sense of humour, because sometimes it's the only thing that gets you through the day, the week, the month. Always look for a lighter side, to just, particularly in those tough times, don't lose your sense of humour, because, it helps others as well as helps yourself.
Great. No, I love that. I think that's bang on. And it's however challenging things are, it's, very rarely is it life-threatening. So I think it's the key thing to remember, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I was talking to someone recently, and they were just talking about, living in the present, that enjoy the present, not just either the past or the future. It's all about now. So I think that's really key. And as you're probably aware, we're a coaching organisation, so I'm always keen to find out, in any part of business or in life, who would be the best coach that you've ever had, and what would make them the best?
So I think my parents, I'm very fortunate that I've had a very stable upbringing with, some parents who are still here with me and very, very supportive, and have been at every stage of my career, even when I said, I'm going to give up my normal sort of private sector job and go and do something totally different. I think I've had a couple of key people in my career that have really made a difference. And I kind of often think about it in terms of those sliding door moments where either somebody recognises something in you that you don't yet see in yourself and gives you an opportunity, or pushes you or stretches you beyond where you thought you were capable, but that actually opens doors and windows and your mindset. And I've had a couple of those in my career. One at GE, who I was fortunate enough to work for again as a consultant at Britannic Assurance. And again, he saw something in me and also let me go to another department, which was a really pivotal point in my career. I think another person that I worked with at TSIS, who used to be the chief audit executive, a guy called Rick Mackold, he opened my eyes to some of the development and coaching techniques that actually I've then carried with me throughout the later, more recent stages in my career, about how to help people within your teams to become self-aware and understand, what their strengths are, what their capabilities are, and how to leverage them and how to share them in a team, and being the facilitator for that. So a couple of people there that I think have created leaps in my growth or understanding or opportunities throughout the path of my career.
Wonderful. And it's interesting you say that. I don't know how much you follow football, but Leeds have just lost their manager, and one of the things that one of their top players, Calvin Phillips, said was that he literally said he saw in me what I couldn't see in myself. And it was a great testament to him as a coach, which is wonderful. So I love to collect quotes or sayings. Is there any particular quotes or sayings that you live by that you fall back on in difficult times?
I've got one, and it epitomizes how I feel about life, how I live my life, and it's a quote from Danny Kaye. It's life is a blank canvas. Throw as much paint on it as you can. And for me, that's, live life to the full, do as much as you can, never pass up an opportunity. And I'm not necessarily talking it from a business professional point of view, just generally, you know, I have a busy life in and outside of work. I've got communities that I foster or lead, you know, outside of the work environment. And part of that is about me following my passions and my creativity, you know, outside of what I do as kind of the normal day job. So you know, continuous learning and stepping outside your comfort zone, you know, on a fairly regular basis. But fill your life, you know, as much as you can, so that if you get run over by the proverbial bus tomorrow, you've no regrets. Brilliant.
Well, I think that's very, very wise words, which are great words to live by. And what would you say you've learned about yourself as you've developed in your career?
Well, I've already shared that kind of epiphany, that kind of,
yes,
you know, about being my authentic self.
Yes.
You know, that was both a mental and emotional and a physical one as well, because I realized at the time I was wearing trouser suits that were grey or black or blue. I didn't own a dress. I had no colour in my wardrobe. As you can see, that's somewhat different now, albeit I'm sure at St Nick's I'm not going to be necessarily dressing like this too often. But I suppose I've learned quite a lot about myself over the last 12 months, because this has been, you know, on the back of COVID and the pandemic. I'd worked at home for 2 years, so I've had to adapt to working in a physical environment with a physical, actual present team, and working in a public facing museum that's open 7 days a week. So that was quite a transition, and quite a good one as I progressed to St Nick's. But I think the other thing is that change in sector. You know, I have become part of the statistics that form the grand resignation, but actually, in order to really be compelling, convincing, and have enough credibility to get a foot in the door for an interview and ultimately get a job in a sector where you've got no experience, you've got to do an awful lot of research, an awful lot. And I'm coming out of, I've never had a job interview in 18 years. So not only has the market moved on a bit, but the technology and the process has moved on a lot as well. So that's been an interesting journey, because that continuous learning has kind of become very condensed and compressed over the last 12 months, looking at whether it's been the charity sector or the health service or education, so that if I'm going for an interview, you know, I can't actually I can rely on some transferable skills from private sector, but actually I've got to do a lot of research about the strategy and the sector overall to be able to convince somebody I'm worth, you know, putting in a senior position to run your charity or your organisation. So really not underestimating the capacity to be able to learn and be able to kind of, you know, move forward and make quite a quantum shift from where you are to where you want to be.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I totally understand. We're really, you know, you're yet to come on board at St Nick's, but and we touched a little bit earlier, but what does the future look like at St Nick's, and what are the key challenges do you think you're going to be facing as you start there?
Well, I suppose the key challenges are the sources of funding are quite complex, and the funding sources directly linked to different projects, different activities, which are different durations or different focal points across the different teams. So really getting under the skin of that and looking at what are the opportunities. You know, there's so much more awareness now building about corporate and social responsibility, about sustainability, and about the benefits. You know, COVID, if nothing else, has illustrated to so many people what the benefit of mental health and connections to nature can provide. So for me, I think companies now who have either divested of office space or are meeting in a very different, in a hybrid way, how can we connect with them as a charity to provide the benefits of what we can do and the knowledge that we've got in a very different type of work environment, that really, you know, everybody's finding their feet in, because the hybrid work environment, you know, we've gone from everybody working from home all the time to kind of somewhere in between. And actually, I think there's an opportunity for us there to work with the corporate environment, and with, you know, I've got a whole bunch of connections in private sector, and I'm now building a whole different set of connections and network in a different sector. How can I marry those together to be able to benefit both?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. It sounds like a very exciting time for you, and yeah, and as we said, I think earlier, it'd be great to maybe come back in a few months and just see how things are going for you, which would be great. And just a few sort of simple things to sort of wrap up with it. What would you say, especially obviously given the current situation we're in, but what would you say to anyone that was thinking of going into business right now?
I think do your research. You know, I've talked about sort of the research and the investment and the time that takes. I am quite a data-driven person. So do your research, find the data, challenge the data, find other sources of data. We've got this, you know, predisposition to kind of, you know, see what we want to see in the first lot of data that we find. So look for other sources, you know, test and challenge the view of the world that data is giving you. But also, I think, follow your passions. What we've seen through COVID is not just the grand resignation, but actually it launching or shifting people's mindset to follow their passions more and do what's more important to them or what fuels their soul. And, you know, I think there's a lot to be said for that. I'm quite fortunate that the creative side of who I am, you know, and I can't see what you can see at the back of me, but, you know, I'm a quilter and a patchworker. I'm the chair of Priory Patchworkers, which is a 60-strong group that's about to celebrate its 40-year anniversary this year with an exhibition in July. And I've taught patchwork and quilting for nearly 10 years now. So the creative side of who I am is a really good fit with St Nick's, because they have a craft group, and that's about building communities and skill sets and getting people to try things that they haven't tried before. So again, you know, where you can follow your passions and do it full time, that's great. But even while I was at TSIS, I always found ways to kind of interweave my more creative side into the way I did the team building events, or we did some of our corporate activities. And, you know, there's always ways to explore that within whatever the boundaries are that you're working within. So I would encourage, keep fostering them either in or outside your work environment, because you never know when that opportunity to take a leap, and it might be a big leap, you know, to do what actually you think you were meant to do all along. Brilliant.
And I mean, looking back on your career, is there anything in your journey that you would have done differently if you could?
Do you know what? I don't think there is. Part of me has thought, would I have liked to have worked abroad? But I am a Yorkshire girl at heart, and I always like coming, even when I've been flying all over the world, you know, coming back into Yorkshire is always that feeling of comfort and grounding. I would still like to experience living or working in a different culture for a period of time. I think that would be really interesting. But no, I'm not really one for regrets. I think even the biggest challenges, the hardest knocks that you experience, the key thing for me is what do you learn from that, and what do you take forward, either to do differently or to just sort of shift your perspective as you go forward into the future. So no, I don't think I would have done anything differently. Everything has brought me to where I am now. I'm kind of very happy with who I am, where I am, the role that I'm in, the part that I play in the communities that I'm a part of. So no, I'm good actually. No regrets or nothing I would have really done fundamentally differently.
No, brilliant. I think that, you know, that sits very strongly alongside the idea of authenticity. You know, if I am who I am, and I've got to be, we are who we are because of everything that we've experienced, and, you know, the good stuff and the bad stuff. So we got, you know, it's difficult to pull that out. And I think it was Mandela had a great quote that said, you know, I never lose, I either win or learn. And I think as long as we take the learnings out of the challenges and the failures that we have, then they're not failures, they're just opportunities to learn more. And actually we learn more probably from our failures than we do from our successes in general. Brilliant. Well, look, just a final question would be, What advice would you give to an 18-year-old you if you could?
This is really interesting because my daughter's 19, so it's like, well, think what advice am I giving to her right now? And she's in the process of transitioning her career path at the moment as well. I think when you look back at being 18, apart from the fact that physically your joints and everything work a lot more effectively than they do in your 50s, I think everything feels like the path that you're on, that's it for the rest of your life, because I don't think as an 18-year-old you can necessarily think in the long term. And I think for any 18-year-old is don't get too hung up in your path or your vocation or where you are right now, because you may completely change your mindset about where you want to go, the direction of travel that you're going in, and actually you've got the time to be able to do that at that age. And even at my age, I mean, if I can shift paths, shift my journey, you know, the possibilities when you're 18 are infinite. I think it's a balance between doing a degree of planning so you're allowing the opportunities to present themselves, but not kind of planning everything to the nth degree in the future, and still living in the moment, because ultimately when you're 18 you're young enough to enjoy everything. You know, and why wouldn't you? I was quite a studious, you know, I did 10 years of further education part-time between being 18 and 28. So when a lot of people my age were out there clubbing, I was hitting the books for my MBA and stuff. And, you know, ultimately that was to open doors and opportunities for me, and I don't regret that. I suppose now I'm probably living more of a kind of an outdoor active life than I did possibly when I was in my late teens and 20s. But yeah, I'm just that balance. Don't get too hung up or fixated about the path. Live in the moment, but foster some networks and some opportunities so that it opens those pathways up later on.
Brilliant. I think that's very sound advice. And yeah, it's an interesting question. I like to ask because it because of the outcomes it has. But yeah, what do you say to an 18-year-old, and what would you want to? Would you want to know what you know now? I'm not totally sure. I would, because would I want to, because it might affect whether we do things differently, in which case if we're happy with what we've done we wouldn't want to change. So
Absolutely.
Well, Ellie, it's been absolutely delightful, and thank you so much. A real insight and very exciting times for which we appreciate. And yeah, it would be great, with your permission, to maybe come back in a few months and just see how things are progressing with St Nick's. And as I said earlier, if there's anything we could do to help, we'd be delighted to. And so it'd be good to sort of catch up on that, and maybe we can make some connections that are useful for you. And yeah, again, thank you so much.
No, that would be great. I'd love that. Thank you for your time today.
Brilliant. Thank you.